Hi, all. Welcome back to the Congressional App Challenge Debugged podcast. I'm your host, Medha, and today our guest is Emily Kellman, who is currently a senior product manager on the Adobe.com team, where she leads personalization efforts across digital media pages to drive customer acquisition. Prior to becoming a product manager, Emily started her career at Adobe almost 6 years ago as a technical consultant within the DX organization. When not at work, you can find her trying out the latest workout studios or restaurants in New York City, as well as watching any and every Bravo reality show. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. You're a podcast veteran. You've been on some podcasts before, so excited to snag an up and coming podcast celebrity. And so I'd
I
love to understand a
wouldn't go
little.
that, but
No, you are. Okay, I think we should just break the ice. You literally have been on like a huge Bachelor podcast that everyone watches,
that is true. Yes, that
right?
was for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bachelor Nation podcast back in July of 2020 when it was COVID and everyone needed content. With my mom and my grandma, but that was fun. This is obviously a little bit more serious, I'd say.
Just a little bit, but again, we all love The Bachelor here as well. We're big fans. And so I'd love to understand a little bit more about what your role at Adobe is. Like, can you just talk about what is a product manager and then like what your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. So I would think of a product manager as kind of like the central point and the point person who can, what I like to say, quote unquote, speak both languages. And what I mean by that is they are the individual in the room who understands what the stakeholders are saying, what they need to do, and is able to translate that to the business stakeholders who are in charge of the strategy, and then vice versa. So they're kind of that cross channel between both main stakeholders, I would say, when building a product. Specifically in my role, we are working on Adobe.com. So our product has a lot of different teams and a lot of different people who touch it. So it's kind of being that mediator and working with all these different stakeholders to kind of drive towards everyone's successful KPIs.
That's super interesting. And so can you talk about a little bit about like can you talk about just like the structure of Adobe, what that looks like? Like what is the digital experience side? What is the digital media side? Where do you sit? And like who are the people you interact with on a day to day?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll kind of tell my story a little bit with this question because I think it lends itself to that.
Yeah.
So within Adobe, there's kind of three different what we call clouds of products, right? We have our Creative Cloud products. That's everything from Photoshop, InDesign, Premiere, all those kinds of things. We have our Document Cloud products, Acrobat, Sign, PDF, all those. And then we have this third group of products called the digital experience products. Now, if you are in digital marketing, you've probably heard of these. If you've done internships in those areas, some of the companies that you work with may use those products. Otherwise, you probably haven't heard of them as much. And that's because these are enterprise level business to business solutions. So when I first started my career at Adobe as a technical consultant, as you mentioned in the intro, I was working within that group of products, the digital experience products. So helping customers who were new to our products either adopt them, implement them, figure out use cases for across all different industries of how best to use them. Um, and I was kind of their go-to for all those things. Now I work on what we call the digital media side of the house, which is everything within Creative Cloud and Document Cloud, and again specifically on our Adobe.com site, aiming for users to buy those products.
That's super interesting. And so, can you explain a little bit more about like how you made that jump from technical consulting to product management? Because they sound like very different things and different experiences. So I'd love to understand like what made you think like why like this is the time to jump, and then also like what what were the transferable skills, if at all?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it kind of goes way back to when I was in college. My major was information management and technology. So again, falling in that realm of speaking both languages, not the computer science major, not the business major, but falling somewhere in the middle. And a lot of my classmates after graduation went into Big Four tech consulting. To me, it didn't sound super appealing to me. I can't explain why. I'm a very creative person. I kind of have that left side, brain side equal thing going. So I wanted to work at a place that was like maybe a little bit more creative.
Hmm.
I had done my internships at large media companies. And so what I learned from those internships, and did both internships in the web space. So one working within the IT department, and then another internship actually working under a product manager. And that's where I first learned about product management. So going into my career and my first job, I really made it my goal. My gold star, the one thing I wanted was to start my career at a tech company. I felt that as technical as I started my career, I could always pull back and be more strategic, but that was my main goal. So obviously landing a job in a big tech company is super competitive and super difficult. At the time, I was interviewing at the big FANG companies and, calling my mom crying after interviews because they were just so intense and that's not my personality. Um, and then basically Adobe worked out. They were building a class of consultants, new undergrad consultants. So that was how I joined. I flew out to San Francisco for my final round interviews. Was kind of weary about the job before that. And then after those interviews, called my mom again and was like, I need this job. These people are amazing. And I've been here ever since. In consulting, I would say transitioning from being a student all your life to being a working professional is really hard, and that's okay. And people kind of underestimate that because there's so many skill sets that come with being a working professional. Like, I'm talking soft skills. How do you sign an email? How do you send an email? What's the etiquette of like following up with someone on something, that I had to learn? And all that stuff you really just can learn from experience. And then in addition to that, it was my actual job. Like, I was working on this enterprise level platform that I knew nothing about. So, I had to do all that at once. And it really took me a year to feel somewhat comfortable in my role. And I always wanted to learn more because I felt, and I still feel knowledge is power. So, product was always in the back of my mind. And within consulting, I hit a point, it was around the 3 year mark, where I felt there was a natural fork in the road. I could continue down the consulting route. I knew I wanted to be a people manager someday. I could work towards that within this consulting world. Or I could try to make the transition to product. And that's the route that I chose to go with. It took a really long time. It was a lot of discussions with people. So it was, talking to people who had been in my role, who had transitioned to product, talking to people internal, talking to people external. And then I just started kind of interviewing internally, looking for different job offerings at Adobe for different product managers, looking for skill sets that I felt I had, even if I didn't have that product management title. And that's kind of how it happened.
That's so exciting. And so I want to take a step back to something you said from college. First, can you talk a little bit about like what you studied in college, like how you decided that was what you wanted to study? And then the second part of my question is more so like, how did you make those decisions? Like you're going to work at a tech company, and things like that.
Yeah. So when I was going to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in my family, for the most part, had studied business. So I was like, okay, I'll look at business schools. That feels
Right.
right. Feels like it's broad enough. I could do whatever. My mom turned to me and was like, you're really good on the computer. Like, maybe you should do something with tech. And I was like, ew, no, I don't want to sit
Mm-hmm.
behind a computer and code all day. And in my mind, that was the only option.
Right.
And she was like, okay, but I don't know. So I went to Syracuse. And when we were up at Syracuse touring the business school, we walked by a different school on campus called the School of Information Studies. And someone had mentioned it to us in passing that I forgot about. Clearly, my mom didn't. And she turned to me and she's like, let's just go in there. Let's just see what it's about. And I was like, ugh, okay, fine. And we went in and we learned about it. And again, they really marketed themselves as that cross between the computer science majors and the business majors, and being able to understand both aspects of a business to that degree of, from a tech and a strategy point of view. And I was like, huh, this is really interesting. So then I started to do some more research, and it turned out there were only at the time like 5 or 7 schools in the country that had a dedicated school for this type of major. Most other schools, they had a similar major in their business school. Things like management information systems, information management, like information technology, things along those lines. So from there on out, I was like, well, they have a whole school towards this. Like, I want to go here because that sounds really cool. So that's kind of how it happened. It was pretty serendipitous. And as my mom always likes to remind me, she is always right. So I owe that to her. um, and in terms of the internships, when I went into my internships, my parents said to me, listen, Emily, like these internships are really important because you're getting exposure to what's out there. And what they said to me is it's just as important to figure out what you like from these internships as it is important to figure out what you don't like. And so that really stuck with me. And so, like I said, I worked at 2 different large media companies doing tech focused things. And what I came away from that is like, wow, tech is such a big focus here. And their main asset is not even the tech, right? It's the videos and all that content that they're creating. That's their main asset. I can only imagine what it's like working at a tech company where tech is the main asset. And it just really excited me. I'm also a very type A personality. Let's not let that fall by the wayside. So like I need a plan in order for me to feel not stressed, not anxious. Like this is what I want to do. And I'm gonna work towards that until it happens.
Right.
It's just my personality. But that's kind of how it came about.
That's so interesting. And first, I think we need to shout out your mom here for really cultivating your journey,
Yes,
right?
yes. That up.
Feel like I feel like moms everywhere are just so excited to hear this this part of the conversation that moms are always right or typically have your best interests at heart. So shout out to her. But I'd love to understand a little bit more about what your internship experiences were like. What were the things you liked and what were the things you didn't like? I know you talked a little bit about like wanting realizing you wanted tech to be a focus, but can you just talk about like some of the soft skills and some of just like I don't know, like the process skills or like the things you realized about like the way tech companies work versus like the way media companies work and things like that in terms of what your internship experiences looked like.
Yeah, so my internships were really interesting because they really opened my eyes to like the cross-functional intersection,
Yeah.
excuse me, that comes in a lot of roles in the tech space. So I mean, this was so long ago at this point.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I know I was also introduced to user experience design during my
Oh
internships, and
yeah,
that also really excited
that's
me
big.
because it was
Yeah.
the idea of like diving into someone's brain and changing something again creatively, but also using that logic and the analytics and the strategy to make that creative decision. And I would say I think that in that regard, UX is like similar to product in that way, because product, you're doing it at a larger scale, right? You're looking at an entire product. um so that was really interesting. That was something that I discovered. I think in the media space, like, I mean, I was an intern. My first summer I was working in an IT department, so I was doing a lot of like internal facing stuff, which made me realize I want to work on external facing stuff. It's more exciting
Mhm.
to me. So that was a realization I had. But there was where I really learned all the different like steps of the funnel. I met with QA resources. I met with program managers. I met with developers, database engineers, just learning about how many people it takes for a product to come to life. So that was really cool. In my second internship, I would say I was definitely focused more on external stuff, which was really cool. It was a a similar type company, and I really got to see like the different cultures within the 2 different companies that I had explored. And I think that was really interesting too, because I think especially in this day and age, like culture is something that it's just getting higher and higher on people's list, right? And I think
Yeah.
rightfully so. So I think all these aspects not necessarily related to product management, but they help you figure out what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And a place like Adobe, where I landed, um, obviously is a culmination of my realizations and what I wanted out of a company that I worked for.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see that you work in digital media at Adobe and you started off doing internships in media. Super funny how that came all full circle for you. Can you talk a little bit more about, I feel like a common question that a lot of students have is like, what do I need to do? Like, what skills do I need to have to be a product
Yeah,
manager? So I'm curious from your perspective. I know the answer is likely you don't need like any specific background or skill set, right? Like you don't need a specific degree, right? But like, can you talk a little bit about some of the most common qualities of product managers and the most common pathways to become a product manager?
totally. So I think in product as well as in other careers, the first thing I'll say is the sooner you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, the more
Mhm.
successful you're going to be. So I realized this in consulting. It helped me in my transition to product. Basically, what that means is when someone throws you a project or a task or a challenge, you need to realize that you have no idea how to do it, but you'll figure out how to get it done. And once you have that realization, it gives you this boost of confidence. So I would say, again, in the product space, when you're dealing with things that are changing so rapidly, as well as any other career in tech, that is something that I live by. Um, I think for product management specifically, prioritization is a huge skill. There's always things to be done, there's always things that need to be improved, and you just don't have the time to get to everything. So you need to really figure out how to prioritize and how to prioritize what your list of items looks like in respect to what the larger company strategy looks like or the larger organization strategy. So that's one thing. I would say communication. We like to say on my team, over communicate. You know, there's only good things that can come from that. There's a lot of bad things that can come from under communicating. So communication for sure. And I think the third thing I would say is really just like an adaptability and a willingness to learn, to fail, to be wrong, to ask for help. And I know that's like eight things in one, but I think it's all similar. And it's like, as type A as I am, I have to be so flexible in my role because things change left and right. And again, I recognize that I don't know everything. There's other people on my team who are experts in other areas, and it's leveraging the people around you to make you successful. Um, so that's a lot more than three, but that's like, I'd say a good summary.
Yeah, no, I think that's super helpful. And so, I know I see we're at close to time, so I want to give time to give some advice to students that are in middle school, high school, and college that are interested in product management, but don't really know where to start when it comes to learning more and preparing themselves when it comes to like trying to build the best skills for product.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's putting yourself out there, raising your hand for opportunities. Hey, I'm an intern. I see you work with a product manager. Can you connect me to them? I'd love to talk to them to learn more. Everyone's going to have different opinions. You asked me earlier, like, what's the perfect jobs that feed into
Right,
product? I didn't answer that because there is no answer.
right.
Anyone can become a product manager. And so it's just putting yourself out there and learning. I would say there's tons of good resources out there as well. Things like Product School, General Assembly may have some product stuff, like really great free resources. You know, there's lots of different product orgs. There's Women in Product that I listen to, like their podcasts. It's great. Doing things like that just kind of gets you immersed and then find the opportunity. There also, I would say, is value in opportunities that aren't labeled as product management. Hey, I'm working on a group project. Someone needs to take lead and organize everything. Oh, let me raise my hand. That's great tangible experience right there. We like to say on my team, I think my manager said this to me, work is one large group project.
Mhm.
So that's a perfect example of how you can kind of start to build those skills. And it doesn't need to always explicitly be labeled product management.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, and I love what you said about work being a big group project. That's definitely how I feel. Um, Except I feel like it's a lot easier to say, "Hey, you need to do your job" when you're getting paid to do it instead of being in school and paying for it to happen.
That's very fair. Listen, that's very fair. When prospective students come to me and ask me about working at Adobe, what I always say to them is,
Mm.
so picture the group project you did last semester or last year, and there's always that slacker. Maybe if you're unlucky, there's two slackers in the group. Working at Adobe, there's none of those. There's no
Mhm.
slackers. That's exactly how I explain working at Adobe, like their culture to prospective students, because I truly believe that everyone is super ambitious and wants to do good work. So that's helpful for sure.
Yeah. It's helpful that you're getting paid to be there too. Um, but I think that's
Yes, you're calling
great
off
to
luck.
hear.
Thank you. I'm so naive.
I think that's great though. I think it sounds like, product management at Adobe is a great experience. And thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to chat through your career and talk a little bit about your journey. It was really valuable for me to hear, and so I'm sure to our listeners it would be extremely valuable as well. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Emily, thank you again, and we will see you all next week for a new episode.
Thank you.